Today we're going to talk about the self join, what it is and when you use it. Alright, so let's talk about the self join. The self join, if you look at the definition of it, is when you join a table to itself. Now, I don't actually look at the self join as a thing. I just look at the inner join, the left join, right join, and full join, and the self join is a subset of it. So when we're looking at inner join, in this circle here, we have customer joining to city. And then down here, we have customer joining city. So all these examples is the customer table joining to the city table. Now you can do a join where you, for instance, have the employee table join to the employee table. And when you do that, that's called a self join. The same table joins to itself. Now let's take a look at an example of this, and you'll see when you'll actually use this. So I'm gonna move over to SQL Server Management Studio, and I am in the SQL Training Online Simple DB, and I want to query the employee table here. Okay, so I'm in the employee table. Now, the most common use of the self join is when you have an employee and the employee actually has a manager. Now, if we look at this though, the manager is another employee. So in order to find out, let's take this first row for example. This first row, we have employee number 7369. The employee name is Smith. Smith has a job of clerk, and Smith's manager is the employee that has the number 7902. So let's go down through this list and look for 7902. And we find it here on row 13. So Smith's manager is actually Ford. And Ford is an analyst. Now Ford has a manager, 7566. So if we look down this employee number and we go down, we find 7566, we find out that Ford's manager is Jones. And we can keep doing this all the way up. The main point here is that the employee table also has a manager in it. And so if we want to see the manager name next to the employee, now we need to join the employee table to itself. And so that would be an example of a self join. So let's try this out. So if we select star from employee, and we're going to go ahead and alias this. So we'll call this the actual emp table. And we're going to, first off, we're going to inner join. So remember, it's self join is just a subset, so we can do any of these joins. We're going to start with an inner join here. And so we're going to inner join with the same table. And we'll call this MAN for manager. And then what do we need to join on? So if we go back to our example, we have the employee number 7369. So this one row represents the actual employee. And so in this case, we're calling this first table the employee. So what we want to do is on the employee record itself, we want to know who the manager is. So the manager number is 7902. So on this first row, we would want to join that 7902. So we're going to take it from the employee record. So now we need to do the on clause on emp.manager, right? Because we want the manager 7902. We want that to equal to the employee number on this row. So the second table, we're going to consider that to be all the managers. So we're going to say the employee number dot manager equals to the manager table, and we want the employee number out of that. So let's go ahead and run and see what we get here. So what we notice here is we got all the columns from the original table, and then on the right side, we get all the manager information. So going back to our Smith example, that first row where we had Smith and he's a clerk, his manager is 7902. And if we go to the right here where we start the manager table columns, we have the manager 7902. And so Smith's manager is Ford. And now we've done a self-join. So this is how you would normally do this self-join. There's a few other examples of it, but this is the most common. You may run into other examples where you need to join the table back to itself. Sometimes you can have like a company or a department table, and the department belongs to another department, or you could have a corporation. If you have a big corporation that you're in, one corporation could own another corporation, which could own another corporation. So anywhere that you have some kind of hierarchy, you can have a self-join. Sometimes it happens in accounting. In accounting, you can have accounts that roll up to other accounts that roll up to other accounts. So the different places that you might use a self-join. Let's clean this up. It's a little messy right now, because really what we want is we want all of the original employees and we want their manager. So at this point, all I want is the employee name from the manager table. So in order to clean this up, let's clean up the syntax first. I like to have carriage returns in there. Let's pull everything out of the original table. So emp dot star, and then all I want out of the manager table is man dot employee name. Let's run this and see what it looks like. So now we've gotten rid of a lot of noise. We have the original record for Smith here, and Smith has a manager of Ford. But if you look at the column name, obviously that just says employee, and now it's confusing. So let's alias that as manager. Rerun it again. And now we can tell that the employee is Smith and the manager is Ford. And we can go down to Ford, where the employee is Ford and the manager is Jones. And we can keep walking that hierarchy. Now there's one more thing I want to point out. Let me pull out the original table. Let's check out the number of records we've got here and make sure we didn't lose any records along the way, because we did an inner join. What if somebody doesn't have a manager? So if you look, I just pulled from the original employee table, and there's 14 records, right? If we look at our join, there's only 13 records. Now what happened there? We lost somebody, but who did we lose? Let's go back to the employee table and see if we can just notice anything. As we look through this employee table, the one thing that I notice if I look in this manager column is when we get to the very top of the hierarchy, the president, whose name happens to be King, well, we don't get them because there's no manager for them. And what did we do here? We did an inner join. So let's take a quick look at our little cheat sheet here. The inner join, in this case, we have basically employee to the manager, but to itself. So it's another employee table, the same employee table, we're just calling it manager. But we'll just call it imp, and I'll put a MAN on it. So it's the manager table. And so when we did this join, we're only getting things that match, right? And so here we got null. There's not going to be an employee that matches to this null, so we're going to drop out this record. So the main thing we need to do here to kind of finish this example is we need to come in and basically turn this to a left join, because we want everybody in the employee table, all 14 records, even if they don't have a manager, which again, we're joining to the employee table, self-join, but when we join to it, we're considering it the manager table. And so we're treating it that way. So we want everything in the employee table, even if it doesn't exist in the manager table. And now if we do this, we should get our 14 records. Let's see if this works here. And there it is. So now we've got 14 records, and King is in here, even though King doesn't have a manager. And And then if you didn't want a null manager, you could always make the same person their own manager using something like is null. And then you could, instead of taking the manager name, you could make them their own manager. And we could put in the emp.employee name. Let's see what that looks like. And so now, even though King doesn't have a manager, King manages themselves. So anyways, that's the self join. Hopefully that helps. I'll link some stuff up in the video or in the descriptions here if you need to learn more about just the regular joins themselves. I have some other videos on those.